Hey guys, what's up? We're gonna do our live stream right now. EPAA speaking. We're gonna do the vice presidential tier list for Kamala Harris today, and also much of the Q&A, which is all going to be here. All right, we're gonna do our Q&A. We're gonna, do all that. Right. So if you have any questions, make sure to put it in the chat right here, which is absolutely fine. We're gonna start this election map, right? So the tier list. I'm gonna present. So, okay, let's go to essentially our tier list, right? I'm just gonna give 15 seconds for everyone to join right now. 15 seconds, and we're gonna begin. Okay, so I'm gonna start off here with my tier list. I've not really looked at this a lot, but I know that most of these candidates who are on this list are at least partially kind of in consideration. Now, of course, some of these candidates are more prominent than others. Some of these choices here are obviously also better than others in terms of this tier list. We're just going to go through the candidates here. So for our tier list, we have Amy Klobuchar, a senator from Minnesota. We have Gretchen Whitmer, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Annie Beshear, Beto O'Rourke, Elizabeth Warren, J.B. Pritzker, Josh Shapiro, Jared Polis, John Ossoff, Mark Kelly, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Raphael Warnock, Roy Cooper. Wait, who's that? I actually don't know who that is. Do anyone know who that is? Like, I actually don't. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know who this person is. I'm just gonna ignore that for right now. Who's that though? Wes Moore, Stacey Abrams, um, Tim Walz, Tony Evers, Mandela Barnes. I actually forgot who she is. Yeah, great. John Fetterman. Okay, so those are the candidates that I will be ranking today. And I'm going to go through that in order. Also, if you have any questions whatsoever on YouTube, this is also kind of a Q&A session. You can definitely pop it in the chat and I'm going to just respond to everything. So let's see, right? For first of all, for Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar is the popular senator from the state of Minnesota. And I'm going to offer the goods and limitations of all these candidates, and I'm going to place them in a tier list based on my opinion. So I'm also going to present something else here. So slides, we're going to present okay, so we're going to first actually, you know what? Let's do that. So let's first stop our screen. We're gonna go share screen and we're gonna share the window. Okay, let's do this, right? So first of all, we're gonna go to Andy Beshear. No, not Andy Beshear. Sorry. So for Minnesota, this is Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar is again a very popular senator from the state of Minnesota. She's an okay pick in my opinion. She's an okay pick in my opinion. I don't believe she's the question for her is that I believe that someone like Kamala Harris in this VP list, she should be choosing. Okay, so let's lay out the benefits and limitations first, right? So, what are Amy Klobuchar's benefits? Well, first of all, she's someone who's very popular. She's someone with like a plus 30 approval rating in her home state. She's very well liked. She won her last election in Minnesota by 24 points. Well, if you look at the 2020 presidential election results there, the state went to Joe Biden by 7 points. So she did roughly, 16 points better than Joe Biden. That's very, very impressive, in my opinion. That's something that is a positive for her. Also, she is at the end of the day a white individual, which is probably something that Kamala Harris wants because she is at least partially Indian American. And that's pretty much it. There's one problem with picking Amy Klobuchar, in my opinion. It's the fact that again, Kamala Harris is a female, which means that she's going to appeal very well to that female vote. She does not really need to have another female on the ballot like Joe Biden did back in 2020 election. That is completely unnecessary for her. She is a female. She should probably pick a white male for this VP pick. For that reason, I'm going to put her in C tier. She's quite electable, but she's just not the candidate profile that I think a Democrat would be looking for. And also, state of Minnesota. If Democrats don't win Minnesota, they essentially lose the 2024 presidential election. It's a state that they have to gamble on. It's not a guarantee right now. In fact, it's far from a guarantee. I think it's closer to 50-50 on whether she wins. Kamala Harris wins or loses the state of Minnesota. But nevertheless, Democrats need to take that chance. They need to run someone from another state that is not Minnesota. They just have to assume that they can win that state. Although I think that she has some type of working class appeal just based on the fact that she had very high rural numbers in the state of Minnesota, I do not believe she is the best pick for Kamala Harris. Now, the next person, Gretchen Whitmer. Now, the good thing about Whitmer in this race is the fact that, again, she's someone from the state of Michigan. She won in 2018. I'm just going to go to a governor's race here. Actually, let's go to 2022. That's a far more, I think, appropriate type of thing to look at right now. So for Minnesota, Michigan, she won quite well. In Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer won by more than 10%, showing that she's able to do very well in the state. Because I'm just going to look at the 2024. I'm just going to look at the 2024 polling averages. Yeah. So I'm just going to look at the Joe Biden versus no, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump polling because we don't have the polling average right now for any other locations. For the state of Michigan right now, Joe Biden essentially left his post. He was down by 2.7 points, and that's a big problem, right? Someone like Gretchen Whitmer could put the state of Michigan back in a Democratic column. Right now, I have the state as leaning for the Republican Party, but if they put up Gretchen Whitmer, perhaps Democrats have a slightly better chance of winning the state of Michigan. After all, her approval rating is still quite high, but again, she's also a female. She also has a problem with Amy Klobuchar. She's a governor, which generally makes a better potential vice president than someone like a senator. But nevertheless, here, I'm still going to put Gretchen Whitmer here in the B tier and nothing above that. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So AOC is someone who I think is not a good pick. You saw her in the thumbnail. I put her in F tier for a good reason. I do not believe she is someone that should be selected. Again, right? AOC there's nothing she can offer. I'm just going to look at her election result. I believe she heavily underperformed Joe Biden in the state, which I'm just going to look at it, right? District map. I'm just going to show you Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC, I don't actually know where her district is. I've kind of forgot. Oh, okay. I think AOC did like 13 points worse than Joe Biden. She is not electable. You should not put up AOC in this race. First of all, she really disengages a lot of voters. You saw how low turnout is 103,000 votes for a general election. That is ridiculously low. We go to a more competitive race, that's like 270,000 turnout. She does not energize the Democratic base. Kamala Harris already has a lot of progressives on board. There's no reason to pick AOC. She is definitely an F tier candidate right now. If I were you, or Kamala Harris, I would definitely not put AOC on the map. Now going to Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear, in my opinion, is a very good pick for a couple reasons. I just told you the profile that a Democrat like Kamala Harris would want as a VP is a white male who can do quite well across the board and with a high favorability rating. He has pretty much all of those attributes. I believe that he is a very strong contender for VP if he chooses to accept it for a couple reasons. First of all, I'm just going to look at the Andy Beshear governor's race back in 2023. You saw that he was able to win the state by 5 points, despite the fact that Biden lost the state by 26 points, in my opinion. Yeah, 26 points. I'm correct. You see all this red here. Donald Trump won all of Kentucky's counties except 2, and then I believe that Andy Beshear won a grand total of 22 counties in the state of Kentucky. He actually has a favorable rating in such a conservative state. He won re-election by 5 points. He did very well in the urban areas. He did well in the suburban areas of the state, Campbell County, Kenton County, Boone County. He also did quite well in the rural areas, narrowed down some of that Republican margin in the state. And also, just generally speaking, he did very well in the state. There was nothing really wrong about him. He was able to get a lot of that working class voters away from the Republican Party and towards the Democrats. He was also able to do very well in Appalachia, very well in the rural areas. He is a suitable pick, in my opinion, for VP. If you have any questions whatsoever, make sure to pop them down in the chat. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to go to the next pick here. I think that Andy Bashir right now is an S tier. I think that he is someone that Democrats should consider picking. He is someone who is a very suitable pick. He's someone who's a very reasonable pick. Just in general, he fits the profile. He's electable. You've seen that he's the Democrat in the reddest state out of all of 50 states in the United States. He's someone who understands how to appeal to voters, and he'd offer a lot to the Kamala Harris ticket. But the problem is here again, I don't think that Kamala Harris is going to pick him, although I think that he is probably one of the best picks out of this list. Now going to Beto O'Rourke. So if Kamala Harris was the presidential pick back in 2020, of course she wasn't, right? I think Beto O'Rourke would probably be a suitable pick. However, in this scenario, I just don't believe that he's as good as a pick as he was back in 2020. For one thing, in 2018, he made his race very competitive. We're just gonna go to the governor's map. Senate. Sorry, Senate. In 2018, Ted Cruz won re-election against Beto O'Rourke by just 2.6%, which is a razor-thin margin. However, in 2022, when he tried to run for office, it didn't go too well for him. He lost the governor's race against essentially Greg Abbott by more than 10%, which really renders him as a lot more unelectable than he previously was. He's no longer this type of Democrat who can win elections. He had very good appeal back in 2018. He did very well in the Rio Grande Valley, for example, Webb County. He got over 70% of the vote there. For example, Zapata County. This was a county Biden lost, and it was a county right now. This was a county that Biden lost. All right, again, and he was able to win it by 26. He carried Fort Worth by 0.7. He won Houston by 16, right? He won Williamson by 2.8. He did better than Biden in the suburbs, and he overperformed Hillary Clinton's numbers in the Rio Grande Valley. But now in 2022 or 2024, he's simply not that suitable candidate that he was back in 2020 or 2018. Right now, I have to say that right now, I'd say that Beto O'Rourke is still a better pick than many other people because he is more working class. He has some of that appeal. He also is white and he's also like a male, which is the type of profile right now that Kamala Harris would want. But I just don't think he's the best pick right now. We go to Elizabeth Warren. Warren's a progressive, just like AOC. I think what Kamala Harris needs to do is to pick a moderate, not a progressive. And also, she's a female, which is not the best thing. She also doesn't offer anything in terms of a home state advantage. The state of Massachusetts is not going to go for the Republican Party. It's not a competitive state. It's probably the most liberal state in the United States, or the second most liberal state in the United States. She's D tier, if not F tier. I'll just put her in F tier. There's no reason to pick her for VP. Now, JB Pritzker. Okay, Pritzker's performance back in 2022, which actually you can't really see it right now, it was all right. It was on par with what Democrats essentially consistently end up performing in the state of Illinois. The problem here is number one, he's not really someone who is super well known as a governor. He's in a deep blue state. He's not in a competitive state. There's no purpose really for picking him. And I just feel like that he probably isn't the most suitable Democratic pick because he doesn't offer anything to the Democratic ticket. Of course, JB Pritzker, it kind of does make sense that to pick someone like a white male who is a governor, who is more experienced with the governor's position. But right now, I just think that that is a very unintelligent pick if I were a Democrat. So I'm going to put JB Pritzker here in about B tier or C tier. I'm going to put him in B tier. It makes sense. He's an okay pick, but I'm definitely not going to go with him if I had that choice. So now Josh Shapiro. Shapiro is also a very good pick for quite a few reasons. First of all, Pennsylvania is a extraordinarily competitive race. He's the governor of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania will be a very competitive race in 2022 and in 2024. That's what I meant. He won against Doug Mastriano by nearly 15% in the state of Pennsylvania. That is an impressive feat for a Democrat, and that's what some Democrats want to replicate in 2024. If Democrats are able to put him on the table, although it's partially because of the fact that Doug Mastriano was not the best Republican candidate, I still believe that Josh Shapiro is someone who is able to really energize a lot of Democrats. He's very good in the suburbs. He was able to really narrow down some of the Republican margins in the rurals. If he's the Democratic pick, perhaps Democrats are more in play in Pennsylvania than they are right now. Now, again, if you want to make sure to leave down a question, I'll make sure to answer that. Because you're watching this stream, feel free to ask some questions right now. Are there any questions? Yeah, I don't think there's any questions right now, but be sure to look at it and insert some questions if you want to. Now, I'm just going to say Josh Shapiro right now. The only problem that Democrat has with Josh Shapiro is the fact that there's an Israel-Palestine war right now, and Democrats are kind of wary to pick someone who's essentially Jewish and also someone who comes from Israel, because a lot of these younger, more progressive Democrats are firmly supportive of Palestine. And just the fact that Josh Shapiro is a Jew, and the fact that again, many Democrats, they don't want to pick someone who could end up being super pro-Israel, to a point that it essentially dejects a lot of younger voters. I believe that I don't think that Kamala Harris will actually pick Josh Shapiro. He has pretty much everything. He is someone who is from a competitive state. He has like a plus 25 positive approval rating from the state of Pennsylvania. He's someone who can significantly benefit Democrats in Pennsylvania, but perhaps not as much as a state like Michigan. For example, for Michigan, there's a very high Arab American population, which could be a problem for Josh Shapiro, because again, there's a lot of Arab Americans in Detroit. Detroit is home to the largest Arab American base of any city in the United States, and someone like Josh Shapiro, who is Jewish, perhaps won't do the best in that area of the United States. But right now, Josh Shapiro here, I still have to say S tier. There's no reason to really not pick him other than his religion, which honestly, generally in most general elections, is not a big issue. But for this general election, it just maybe. Now, going to the next state here, not the next state, the next candidate, Jared Polis of the state of Colorado. Now, Jared Polis in the state of Colorado, he is someone who is relatively a stronger powerhouse in the state of Colorado. He's someone who's able to win elections generally by quite a substantial margin. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button right now. That'd be greatly appreciated. Like this live stream if you haven't already. Be sure to like the live stream, please. And also, you can really talk about, you can really, engage in the comment section and essentially answer some questions. Ask some questions. I'll answer those questions if you want to. Anything related to politics, put it in the comment section. Okay, so Jared Polis, I'm just going to pull up. I actually don't have that election result right now regarding Jared Polis, but he's a Democrat from Colorado. He won the 2022 governor's election in Colorado by like 20 points, which is extremely impressive. He's someone who could appeal to a lot of moderate voters. He's also someone who is, again, a white male, which is someone who, again, Democrats really want for this election cycle. But I really think that Jared Polis, the problem is he's not very well known of a name. And the fact is that he's someone who, although he's a white male, he's not from a swing state. He doesn't really offer much to Democrats on the table. So I'm inclined right now to say B tier. He's probably more suitable than some of the other B tier candidates, but he's not someone that if I was Kamala Harris, I'd necessarily pick. Now going to Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff is a sitting U.S. senator from the state of Georgia, which in of itself does offer a lot. I'm just going to show you the Georgia Senate runoffs here. We all know Jon Ossoff unseated Republican incumbent David Perdue back in 2020 by a researched margin. The good thing about Jon Ossoff, he's a white male. He's someone with some charm. He's someone who's able to utilize social media quite well, appeal to a lot of younger voters. Those are all desirable characteristics of Democrat Jon Ossoff, which could make people believe that he is a more suitable candidate. The problem here is that inexperience, right? Kamala Harris is someone with quite a bit of experience, but again, voters are considering, what happens if the VP actually becomes the president? Because that almost came into reality in 2020, in 2024. So right now, again, Jon Ossoff doesn't really have that much experience. He only got elected to the Senate in 2020. He's someone whose record is still somewhat unclear because he doesn't have as much experience in the Senate. There's no real voting record with him. So that could be a problem, but he does fit the description of what a Democrat may want. Right now, he is a white male. He's someone from a competitive state. He could potentially put the state of Georgia in play. I'm just going to search you up the state of Georgia in terms of their polling right now. So Georgia polling right now has been absolutely brutal for the Democratic Party. It's like Trump +6 over Joe Biden, but someone like Jon Ossoff could indeed put that same play. But even if Democrats choose Jon Ossoff, I heavily doubt that they'll actually be able to win the state of Georgia. I think that's pretty evident and pretty clear. I think that Jon Ossoff is an okay candidate, and in fact, a pretty good one, but he doesn't make the S tier. I would not pick him. I would not pick him if I was Kamala Harris, but he's more suitable than some of the other candidates on this list. So if you have any questions, again, make sure to put it in the chat right now. So I'm just going to go up with Mark Kelly here. We're just going to refresh my page. I know it's in Chinese, but whatever. Okay, so I'm just going to search one of my polls up here. I'm kind of annoyed that this is in Chinese, but whatever. Yeah, so what we see, Mark Kelly was second on my poll here for the most suitable VP choice. That's not surprising whatsoever. Mark Kelly's someone who is more electable in general. In 2022, I'm just going to show you that. So in 2022 for Senate, he actually defeated Republican Blake Masters by quite a decent margin for Mark Kelly. He won over Blake Masters by close to 5 points in the state of Arizona, and he certainly does put a state on the map for the Democratic Party. Arizona was not heavily contested by Joe Biden. He lost a lot of support among Hispanic voters. He's also losing support among moderate voters in terms of Biden, and Biden was really not contesting the state of Arizona. And also someone like Mark Kelly could definitely put the Democrats in play in that state. The problem here is that Kamala Harris does not have appeal to those moderate voters in Phoenix, and she doesn't really have that enthusiasm to turn out many of these voters. Someone like Mark Kelly, though, I believe personally has a lot of, although he's not very experienced, he's an astronaut, and that does make you essentially more well liked politically. I think that he is someone who Democrats could certainly consider as a VP pick. He may not be the best in my opinion, but I think he is definitely up there. I think he's probably, I would say Andy Bashir right now is the best VP pick for the Democratic Party. Josh Shapiro is second, and I say Mark Kelly right now on this list is third. Okay, so let's move on here. So Governor Gavin Newsom. So Governor Gavin Newsom is someone who I think is pretty suitable as a really some type of president in terms of how Democrats may perceive this, because he does have more experience in handling the most populated state in the United States. This makes you a potential contender for president. However, there's a couple of problems with picking Governor Gavin Newsom. The first thing, he faced a recall election in 2021. 2021, say governor recall. I'm just gonna pull this up. I know I spelled the word wrong, but whatever. So he faced a recall election over his handling of COVID-19. Now, of course, that failed by several percentage points, by 24%. But still, you don't generally want to have someone who almost got recalled into this type of election cycle. And the fact is, he doesn't put any state in play. He's not very exciting for a lot of voters. I don't see much enthusiasm surrounded by him. He doesn't really offer that much to Democrats in terms of being on the table for a Democratic Party. although he is, again, a white male, which is generally desirable, and the fact that he's more experienced as a governor, those attributes make him a suitable pick. However, there's one more problem with Governor Gavin Newsom. It's the fact that he actually lives in the same state as Kamala Harris, I believe. And that's a problem because if he has either he or Kamala Harris has to change their state address, because apparently the president and the vice president cannot run essentially on the same ballot if they're from the same state. If they run on the same ballot, they don't get the electoral college votes from that state, which means that Democrats would automatically forfeit 54 electoral college votes if they run Governor Gavin Newsom along with Kamala Harris, which is not something that's very desirable for the Democratic Party. Now, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also like this stream if you've been having fun so far. Now going to the next state. Now not going to the next state. Where do I place Governor Gavin Newsom? Probably slightly above Governor J.B. Pritzker, another Democrat from Illinois. But I think that these two are very similar. They're not bad candidates, but they're not great candidates either. Now next Democrat here, Democrat Pete Buttigieg. Okay, so a Democrat, I think the head of transportation, Secretary of Transportation, whatever you call that, Pete Buttigieg. Now, Buttigieg is quite interesting. He's the first official gay member of a cabinet office, and that he reportedly is being considered for VP. However, the problem with Pete Buttigieg is that I don't see anything associated with him that would make him a really good vice presidential pick for some reason. I just don't think that he's someone who would, again, be a good VP pick, in my opinion. I think that he's someone who's quite average in terms of the fact that he does not offer anything to the ticket. He's not very experienced politically. Sure, he has a cabinet post, but he doesn't have any experience with serving the Senate, serving in the governor, serving the House, right? All those type of experiences that you generally want a presidential candidate or a VP to have. That's essentially something that he's lacking. And for that reason, I don't think that Pete Buttigieg right now is the most suitable candidate for VP. Again, place any comments or questions in the live chat because I don't see any chat right now whatsoever. If you have any questions, be sure to put it in the chat. Thank you. Because I really don't have much to say right now if you don't put anything in the chat. I'm done with all these candidates, and then I'm just going to be done with the live stream. Now going to, again, Pete Buttigieg, I'm going to place him right now in roughly C tier. I don't think that he offers a lot on this tier list. Now, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. Raphael Warnock I'd say he's a senator. He won re-election in 2022 in a year that was supposed to be favorable for the Republican Party, which is probably a very good thing. Okay, I see a question. Will the fact that he's gay not have a negative impact? That's a good question. That's actually something that was something that I was wondering yesterday when I first saw this tier list. Will being gay end up hindering his prospects of winning the election? Um, I don't actually know that. I feel like that he may have some more appeal with gay voters, but that's a very small segment of the total population. I'm not sure if that's going to have any impact whatsoever on the election. I just feel like he doesn't have any experience, and the fact is, some people they might not vote for a gay individual, which is absolutely true. It's not a stereotype. It is true. Being gay may have a slightly negative consequence for him in the general election. Okay, who is the best candidate? So far on this list, I say Governor Andy Beshear is the best candidate out of this short list. The reason is he's essentially flawless, other than the fact that he's in a state that's really very Republican. It's not a state that Democrats will put in play as opposed to Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly. Josh Shapiro could help in Pennsylvania. Mark Kelly could help in Arizona. But these two all have their own weaknesses as well. Josh Shapiro's a Jew. That's not going to help, again, voters, especially Democratic voters who are supportive of Palestine or Arab Americans. That would end up significantly, hindering Democratic prospects with these Arab Americans, some a group of voters that are extremely significant in the state of Michigan. Now, Mark Kelly, he's not as experienced as some of the other candidates, which could be a problem. Next question. I would think it just further reduces the ticket the farther they then grow it, she needs a boost. She absolutely needs a boost. In fact, I don't think even a boost will get her over to winning the election as of right now, but again, we'll have to see. The Jew thing canceled him. I already heard he's out. He's not necessarily out. It's just the fact that I don't think he's very appropriate of a candidate. The Jew thing essentially, again, right? Being a Jew doesn't necessarily hinder your chances of winning an election or being chosen as VP. However, in these particular circumstances where where again the Israel-Hamas war is raging on, that is a big problem in terms of that. Now I'm going to move back to our tier list. If you have any additional questions, be sure to pop it in the chat. If you haven't already, please subscribe to EPAA or please at least consider subscribing right now. If you enjoyed this live stream, please subscribe. Thank you so much. That really helps me out. Anyways, next candidate, not governor, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock of the state of Georgia. He's an okay candidate. He's not someone who I'd say I'd end up picking as really my VP if I was Kamala Harris because of the fact that both of these are minority individuals. I would say that Kamala Harris also already significantly benefits the ticket by having this minority backup, and she really needs someone who is a white individual, a white male. Although Raphael Warnock is a male, I do not believe that really a black male or someone who is a minority is really going to cut it at this moment in time. I think what Kamala Harris really needs is someone who is, you know, a white male, someone who's more experienced, which does end up essentially canceling him as a candidate. I think he's an okay candidate, but he's not particularly great. And the fact is, he does not fit the Democratic playbook right now, at least of Kamala Harris's demands. Are there any other questions? I'll be sure to answer them. I'm just gonna have a sip of water right now. Okay, so next candidate, Governor Roy Cooper. Now, Roy Cooper is someone who, again, he might put the state of North Carolina in play, but the thing is, I just don't think North Carolina is very competitive in this election cycle so far. Again, there's a lot of speculation by Democrats, at least, that they could put North Carolina in play, but I really doubt it. It's a state that that's currently leading for Trump by like 7 points. And it's not a state that even if they choose Roy Cooper, Democrats are going to win. The reason behind that is in 2020, I'm just going to show you that. Which one is the 2020 election results? Yeah. In the governor's race, so I'm going to show you the state of what? The state of North Carolina. In the state of North Carolina, I don't. Yeah, so the fact that she needs help is the problem. VP is not what drives voters. VP is not something that really drives voters. I certainly agree with that. Picking a poor VP choice is not a make or breaker. It's something that does not. I think that the VP really doesn't matter a lot. For example, Trump picked JD Vance. JD Vance is not the best candidate. He's not very experienced, and he comes from a state that doesn't really matter right now in presidential politics. It would have certainly been beneficial for Trump if he was running in like 2012. But again, the state right now is just not very competitive, and that's not the best. He's not the best pick right now. But I certainly think that this election cycle, speaking again, the VP doesn't really matter, but I'd say that's still something that it's worthwhile considering. I think that someone like Mark Kelly or someone like someone like Mark Kelly, someone like Andy Bashir, those are candidates that really help the Democratic ticket overall. It might just help a little bit, but again, a little bit really matters in politics. A little bit would have gotten Hillary Clinton to the finish line in 2016. A little bit would have gotten Donald Trump to the finish line in 2020. He picked Vance because he is America first. Again, right? He is. I would say that, right? He's someone who has been firmly supportive of Trump since 2022. But another problem with Vance is potentially that in 2016, he actually called JD Vance America's Hitler, which is not something that's very beneficial for the ticket. But again, that also shows something else. It shows that someone who previously did not support him in 2016 is now supporting him and on board with him in 2024. That's my opinion, anyways. I'm gonna go back to the tier list here. I've got the comments opened on my laptop. I'm streaming on my desktop, so that should be fine. So Roy Cooper, the problem with Roy Cooper is not that the fact that he's a bad candidate. It's not the fact that again there's anything wrong with him, but it is the fact that he may not, I think, add as much value to the Democratic ticket as someone like Mark Kelly or someone like Andy Bashir in this race. The reason I'd say that Andy Bashir is perhaps not someone who is, someone like Roy Cooper is not as good as Andy Bashir or someone like Mark Kelly is the fact that he's the governor of the state of North Carolina. And although he's a pretty decent governor in terms of approval ratings, he's not someone who's like a wow, like someone like Andy Bashir, for example. So when we look at the presidential election results here, Trump won the state by 1.3. Governor Roy Cooper won the state by 4.5. So that's pretty decent, but that's around a 6-point overperformance, right? Someone like Andy Bashir overperformed Trump's number in 2020 by like 30%. My bet is Mark Kelly. Right now, I'd say that out of the candidates, Mark Kelly is probably, yeah, I'd agree. I think Mark Kelly right now is the most likely VP choice right now for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's from a swing state. He puts Arizona in play. Secondly, he does not have any baggage whatsoever. He's someone who's relatively popular. Someone who won Arizona by 5 is certainly someone who's perhaps has a pretty good chance of winning the state. He not only did quite well in the urban areas, Pima County, he outran Joe Biden by 6. Maricopa County, he outran Joe Biden by 4. But even in some of the more rural counties, for example, Graham County, for example, Greenlee County, right? In these rural areas, he also did better than Joe Biden. He also did better than Joe Biden, I believe, in Coconino County, in Apalachee County, which are all counties with relatively high Native Americans, right? He's someone who I believe is quite electable compared to some of the other Democrats in this race. Andy Bashir, the problem here is that if Andy Bashir runs as VP and then he loses the vice presidential election, I just simply do not believe that he can retain the governor's mansion because of the fact that people in the state of Kentucky would have associated him with the National Democratic Party, which would really hurt his chances of becoming essentially the nominee for this governor of Kentucky. He puts AZ into play, opens up other paths. Yeah, that's my point, right? He's able to do very well with suburban voters, especially in the state of Arizona, which again is something that's very worthwhile. Now, Governor Roy Cooper, I put him in A tier, but he's not someone I believe that Kamala Harris should pick as of right now. Now, who is this? Does anyone know who this is? Like, I do not know who this is. I remember searching this up. Oh, I remember. I think he's the Washington governor. That's pretty fair. Right? I think he's the Washington governor. I forgot his name, but he's the governor of Washington. He doesn't offer many things, so C tier. I don't really have much to talk about him yet because he's just not someone who offers a lot to the Democratic ticket, which does make sense, right? I don't think someone I believe he's a Washington governor. He doesn't offer much. He's a governor, sure. He does fit the profile of a white dude who again has political experience. Something that Kamala Harris probably wants, but again, he doesn't offer anything. He really doesn't have as much name recognition. He doesn't have a regional advantage. He doesn't have a specific group of voters he really appeals to. C tier for that. Governor Westmore, I honestly think that Governor Westmore is not a good choice. I'm going to put him in D tier. First of all, he's someone so he's essentially someone who's again moving he's someone who's I'd say pretty, he's pretty inexperienced. He was elected back in 2022. It's not something that really he's not again, Maryland is not in play for the Republican Party. He's also not someone who's particularly appealing. He's also not like a white guy. which again may sound a bit racist if you want to spin it. But the fact is, right now, what Kamala Harris needs is a white running mate who's able to appeal to suburban voters, able to appeal to some rural voters, able to get Democratic enthusiasm up. I think that Governor Westmore is not someone who can end up doing that. Now, Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams, again, I think he was under consideration for Biden's VP in 2020. I think that makes sense at the time. Biden needed to pick someone who is essentially who was like a female and someone who was of another race than white, and that would have. And I honestly believe that Stacey Abrams would have been a better pick for Biden than Kamala Harris. However, in this election, really, there's no one that she doesn't really expand the Democratic base. Georgia right now is not really that in play for the Democratic Party. Also, she did not do very well in the state of Georgia back in 2022. I'm just gonna pull this up. So for governor in Georgia with Stacey Abrams back in 2022, she was not able to do very well in the state of Georgia. That's essentially a fact. She lost the governor's race against Brian Kemp by 8%. That is not something to brag about. She made this race very competitive back in 2018. In 2022, it showed that she was simply not someone who was very electable. Uh, Abrams, no election denial toss. They need that issue. Yeah, I think Democrats need to bang on. Democrats, one of the things that Democrats have that essentially was the reason the Democrats retained the Senate back in 2022 and also nearly retained the House was the fact that election integrity was something that was put up by the Republican Party and it was a problem for the Republicans. Republicans emphasized that the 2020 election was stolen, while reality, they weren't really able to produce any proof of that, and essentially it drove a lot of voters angry, and that was a problem for the Republican Party, right? They made this claim, they couldn't back it up. Most Americans thought that it was false, and therefore Republicans essentially got penalized by the American voters who did not really agree with the Republican stances on that position. And therefore, that really cost the Republican Party some votes in 2022. I think Stacey Abrams does not make sense right now. Same as Governor Westmore in D tier, and also she's a female. She's also a minority group, just like Kamala Harris. She does not offer anything to the ticket. Now, Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota is next. So, Governor Tim Walz in the state of Minnesota. I'm just going to check that 2022. Minnesota's governor's race was actually not on the competitive races list, so I'm going to go to Minnesota. I believe he won by a decent margin. Yeah, against Scott Jensen by roughly 8%. And also, Democrats, honestly, this was not a bad performance because Democrats nearly lost the auditor race and the attorney general race. Democrats had a pretty good showing in the Secretary of State race, but it just shows that the state of Minnesota could easily go for the Republican Party. Tim Walz just had a very similar performance to Joe Biden did in the state back in 2020. Now, I think that Democrats do need someone who probably can show up the state of Minnesota, and someone like Tim Walz does end up performing that. I'll see some of the other comments. I have to go to work. Rasmussen poll hits today. Interesting to see the crosstops put into your bottle. Yeah, I'll do something along those lines in a future video, but not right now. And also, I guess I picked a bad time because right now where I am, it's essentially you can see 7:49 p.m. But for most Americans right now, it's like 7:49 a.m. That's in Eastern time. And again, many people don't really have time for my live stream right now. Anyways, Governor Tim Walz, I think Democrats do need to find someone who can shore up Minnesota. Minnesota is actually in risk for a Democratic Party. They could easily end up losing the state of Minnesota, which would be a big problem right now. Republicans win Virginia, New Hampshire, or New Mexico, it's over. I think if Republicans win either Pennsylvania, I'm in Hong Kong. Okay? Yeah. So New Hampshire and New Mexico, it's over. Not only is New Hampshire and New Mexico, not only if Republicans lose New Hampshire and New Mexico, it's got it's gone for the Democratic Party. If Democrats lose either Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Minnesota, it's gone for the Democratic Party, in my opinion. Maybe Democrats can afford to lose Wisconsin, but I really think Democrats need Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania at this point. Democrats are not going to win Georgia based on how things are unfolding. Democrats are not going to win Minnesota, in my opinion. The Hispanic vote is just not favorable for Democrats. Kamala Harris does not appeal to the white working class voters or to white suburban voters. And that's the problem, right? I think Democrats, again, with Kamala Harris, their only path is Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and hold all the Hillary Clinton states. Retired Army been all over. The time you said made me curious. Yeah, 12 hours off of Eastern time. Now, Tim Walz right now, I'd say, I'd say maybe C tier. Maybe I'll put him in B tier, but I think that that's not someone who's very suitable of a candidate. I do not believe Democrats should end up picking Tim Walz. If I'm Kamala Harris, certainly I would not. Now, Governor Tony Evers, we had the Michigan governor who was put in B tier. You had the Pennsylvania governor who was put in S tier. I actually think Josh Shapiro should come in third. He makes sense, but he's not super good of a candidate. Right. Uh, let's see. Tony Evers. So Tony Evers, the thing is, Democrats can still maybe afford to lose Wisconsin. I'd say that if Democrats lose the state of Wisconsin, it's essentially 90% game over for Democrats, but they still have a narrow chance of winning. If Democrats lose Michigan or Pennsylvania, they definitely end up losing the election. And I think there's really no dispute around that. So for Governor Tony Evers, he had a pretty good run in 2022. I'm just going to pull up the election results in the state of Wisconsin. So for the state of Wisconsin here in the state, it voted for Tony Evers by 3.4. So essentially, if Kamala Harris picks him, Democrats have a better chance in the state of Wisconsin. Tony Evers outran Mandela Barnes on the same ballot by about 4 points, which is also a good sign for him. But the thing is, with Michigan and Pennsylvania right now are more urgent matters for Democrats. And although Tony Evers, he beat the quote-unquote zombie that is Scott Walker, I don't think he appeals to anyone in particular. I think that he might appeal to a couple of working class voters, but just based on these results, for example, Vernon County, this was a county that voted for Trump. He won it, right? He was able to do quite well in Eau Claire. He did quite well in La Crosse. He did quite well in Crawford compared to Joe Biden. He doesn't appeal that much to a lot of voters. I think that, again, he also did not. Um, I think Joe Biden lost Waukesha by 20 points, and he also lost Waukesha by 21 points. Right, he doesn't really offer that much in the Democratic Party, though he did overrun Biden by a pretty decent margin in Milwaukee. I just don't think he appeals much to the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris doesn't appeal to black male voters. Watch crosstabs. I think they're burning her now. The problem here is that, again, I'm going to refer to Alan Lichtman's model here. The thing about this is that Democrats, they cannot afford a party contest. Democrats are already in chaos and shambles. If they end up going to DNC, they're most certainly going to lose the election. And that's just the problem. I think Kamala Harris also doesn't appeal very much to black males, but at least she kind of appeals to black females, and I guess at least she appeals to black voters more than Joe Biden. That does not mean she has significant black voter appeal, but that just means that he does a bit better than Joe Biden. Right? Biden was really struggling with black voters. I believe he won black voters. Joe Biden did by 78 points in 2020, and then in 2024, he was only pulling ahead by like 54 points. Yeah, okay. So really, I think that she does bring some level of black voter appeal. The problem here is that it's not going to be the same numbers as 2020. He's going to do worse than Biden in 2020. So among black voters, Biden had like what 86% among black voters back in 2020. I think Harris might get to like 82 or 83%, maybe 81%. My best bet somewhere between 81 and 83. But if Joe Biden's the Democratic nominee, Democrats may only get like 79% or 78% of black voters, which is even worse. Now, Governor Tony Evers, I'll put him at the bottom of A tier. At the end of the day, he's a Democratic governor from a competitive state, a state I expect the Democratic Party to lose by like 3 to 5 points in 2024. So maybe he does end up putting that state in play. But I think that Kamala Harris right now, she's better off picking Mark Kelly or Andy Bashir. So Mandela Barnes. Again, I think Mandela Barnes is just a tier worse than Tony Evers in terms of electability. Evers won by 3.3% or 3.4%. Barnes lost by 1% against Ron Johnson. I'm just gonna pull up Wisconsin here for the comparison between the two and essentially the crosstabs, right? So Tony Evers won by 3.4. For example, Evers won Milwaukee by 53. Barnes won Milwaukee by 43, and then Barnes won Milwaukee by 40. Right, Waukesha County, Ron Johnson won it by 26. Tim Michaels won it by 21. You go to some of the working class counties, for example, Vernon County, that voted for Ron Johnson by 6. It also voted for Governor Tony Evers. Madison County, that voted for Governor Tony Evers by 58 points. It voted for Democratic challenger Mandela Barnes by 54 points. So he did run worse than Tony Evers essentially everywhere. Although, again, he was facing an incumbent that was quite popular in the state of Wisconsin. I just don't believe that Mandela Barnes is really that strong of a candidate. Although he did overperform expectations. Overperforming expectations is not enough. You have to win the state. If you didn't even win the statewide election, I think you can essentially throw out the argument that you're essentially electable in that state. I think she's gonna do worse. Yeah, she's actually not black. That's the thing. But here's the thing: she's 0% black. She's like what? Yeah, she's like 70% Indian and 30% white. She's not black. But the thing is, people don't know about that, right? I know many people who think that Kamala Harris is like 50% black, although she isn't. But again, the thing that matters is perception and not really fact at this moment in time in politics. People's perception actually do more than actual facts, in my opinion. Now, anyways, I'd say that probably what I did put Mandela Barnes here. Probably, I would say B tier, if not C tier at this point, because I did end up also mentioning that you do want to choose essentially a white male, and he's a black male, which is probably not the best at this point for the Democratic Party. Now, that's who is that? Is that Tina Smith or is it not? Like, I don't remember. Yeah, I think that probably is Tina Smith. And in that case, again, I think that Kamala Harris needs to choose a male. Tina Smith is someone who is not as popular as Amy Klobuchar. Klobuchar I put in C, and she essentially did about 15 points worse than Amy Klobuchar, maybe about 13. Wait, what? Let me just do the math. Yeah, I think she did 19 points worse than Amy Klobuchar did in 2018. In 2020, she won by like 5, and Klobuchar won by 24 in 2018. So I think that she doesn't appeal as much as someone like Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota. And the fact is, Minnesota is a state where Democrats can no longer afford to put a VPS in Minnesota because, again, if Democrats lose Minnesota, they're also going to lose Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. It's already game over. Democrats need to make a gamble. They can't try to lock down Minnesota while essentially neglecting a lot of the other swing states, in my opinion. Again, if you have not already, please consider liking and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Like this live stream, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Anyways, I'd say that Tina Smith probably, at this point, I'd say C tier. Now, John Fetterman. Fetterman actually did quite well in 2022, but I don't think that should be attributed to him as much as it was to the Republican Party. So I'm just gonna pull up Pennsylvania. Where is it? Here. Fetterman won the Senate race in Pennsylvania by 5 percentage points. The thing was that Mehmet Oz was actually pulling ahead of Fetterman by like 3%. essentially that was a very bad performance. It was a terrible performance for the for the Republican Party in the state of Pennsylvania. Essentially, Mehmet Oz saw huge bleeding in the rural areas. For example, I'm just gonna do a comparison. Okay, so we have the presidential election here opened. Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania by 1.2%. I'm just gonna pull up some random counties, right? We're gonna go to Crawford County, for example. That was 68% for Donald Trump. It was only 64% for Mehmet Oz. We go to another county, for example. I'll go Armstrong County. That was 75% for what is that? That was 75% for Donald Trump, and Mehmet Oz did not even crack 70% in that race. And if we look at the Democratic numbers, for example, Allegheny County, this is essentially where John Fetterman claims home. That was a 20% margin for John Fetterman. It was like a 20% margin. Yeah, a 20% margin for Joe Biden. We go to somewhere like, I don't know, Bucks County. It voted for Biden by like 4.4. This is kind of like the least less affluent part of the suburbs around this area. It's kind of like a Macomb County of the state of Michigan. And it also voted for John Fetterman by 7. We go to somewhere like Delaware County, I'd say Montgomery County. It voted for Fetterman by 28. In 2020, Joe Biden won it by 26. So what we saw was that Fetterman did better across the board in the state of Pennsylvania. The problem here is that it should not be attributed to John Fetterman, but rather the lackluster performance by the Republican Party of essentially statewide. Democrats retained all 4 competitive seats in the state of Pennsylvania. They retained Susan Wild's district. They retained Matt Cartwright's district. They retained Summer Lee's district. They retained Chris DeLuzio's district. It can be attributed to some of the incompetence of the Republican Party of the state of Pennsylvania back in 2022. So that was the thing, right? And essentially, the Republicans did very poorly, essentially across the state. We saw Governor Josh Shapiro dominated over Doug Mastriano. The U.S. Senate race, John Fetterman won because of that down ballot effect, not because John Fetterman is a particularly appealing candidate. Another problem with John Fetterman is that he had some health problems. In CNN's exit polls back in 2022 in the midterms, about 47% of voters believed that John Fetterman did not have the mental acuity to serve, and only 50% believed he did. And he won 51.2% of the vote because Republicans were somewhat incompetent. Republicans were not able to energize their base. Mehmet Oz was not very appealing to many voters. And the fact was, Republicans just essentially had a lot of bleeding in the rural areas. Democrats turned out their voters, and Democrats won. But John Fetterman, he had a stroke. He had some of the problems Biden had. He had probably a lacking health, and he got destroyed in the debates against Mehmet Oz. Not because Oz was a good debater, but because John Fetterman was just not the most appealing debater out of everyone. And I just say that John Fetterman, I don't think that he's someone who is really a good Democratic candidate on this map. So I'm gonna put him in around I'll put him B tier just because he's from Pennsylvania. The fact that he won the Senate race there by 5%. But again, I don't attribute that to Fetterman. I attribute that to the Republican failure in the state of Pennsylvania back in 2022. So that's pretty much it for my rankings right now. I don't have much to say besides that. Any questions? If you have any questions, make sure to post that in the chat. Do you have any questions? Because I'm pretty much done with my live stream. It's been an hour. It's been a pretty tedious hour for me. So are there any questions? If there's any questions, I'm going to answer them in the Q&A section. I'm willing to stick around for like another 15 minutes. If you want anything for me to analyze, be sure to post it in the chat. My Wi-Fi is also kind of lagging. If you have any questions about politics or anything in general, you can definitely ask me. And I'm just going to pin that. Wait, I can't pin it right now. Great. Anyways, do any of you have any questions about this live stream about politics? Because I'm going to essentially end the live stream in the next minute if no one has questions, because I'm pretty much done with my 1 hour live stream right now. If you don't have any questions, well, this is essentially the end of the live stream. I'll wait until the 1 hour mark. If any of you have any questions about the political environment of anything, you can definitely put it in the chat right now. Otherwise, I'm just ending the stream. I'll wait until the 1 hour mark. It looks like that none of us have any questions. Again, I see some new viewers. I'm gonna wait for you for like people to like respond. I'll give you another minute if you have any questions about Harris's VP, if you have any questions about politics, if you have any questions about my 2024 election prediction on the presidential level, the Senate level, or the governor's level, be sure to put that in. But again, I don't have anything much to say. We've already had the live stream. It's been an hour. I've ranked all the candidates. So I'm just gonna end the stream now. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching. I know some of you guys may have stayed in for the entire hour, which is insane. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Peace out.